Appreciate your time. Well, everyone, we have another exciting interview. My business school classmate and colleague, Aviv, is joining us to talk a little bit about what he's been up to. He has a great background with working at a company that got acquired. He has some great personal finance tips and strategies that you guys also hear about. So, Aviv, thank you for taking time to speak with me.
Of course, Delano. Really happy to be here.
Awesome. So we were just talking about it before we started recording, but you worked at a firm after business school, Dormigo, which you can explain exactly what they do and what you guys were doing over there. But talk about your experience with Dormigo, what it was like. There was a buyout, so you can touch on that, but I'd love to hear more about your experience over there.
Sure. So maybe let me give a little bit of background. So Dormigo started out in 2016-17 with my co-founder Dan and I, and the main idea was to try to figure out how do companies understand what's the right rate to lease a living space, whether that's an apartment, whether that's a hotel room or a vacation rental, or a room at a ski resort or whatever. A place that you rent for a specific amount of time, a night, a week, a month, a year, and how much should they charge? Because a lot of people, just like us, so I'm living in downtown Chicago, where I stayed, after business school, and most of my friends, myself included, are renting places.
Yeah.
And you see, two buildings right next to each other. One of them is completely vacant, and the other one is completely full.
Yeah.
How does that happen? If they're let's assume that they're identical for a second. They're
Exactly.
both new, both from the same renovation, whatever. How does that possible? And it's mostly comes down to price, like wrong pricing. You're too high, you're too low, you're not maximizing your potential. And that was kind of the idea that started us with Dormigo. And one of the things you and I got to talk before, and I'm happy to mention that here, was that it was very challenging to sell this product, because who are you going to sell it to? You're going to sell this to real estate private equity firms, you're going to sell it to REITs and the huge holding companies that buy a lot of real estate. And so every one of those deals takes a long time. And they're all very worried that, I don't want to screw them over and they're going to lose money because they're working with me.
Exactly.
So what we ended up doing was we actually started, slowly and carefully to build out mini hotels across the country.
Got it.
Started out from, a 3-apartment building here in Chicago.
Wow.
And we saw that things are working and the technology is working. And so we added, another 5-unit building, and then another 8 and another 10. And so we were able to grow to roughly 100 units across the country.
That's impressive.
On around, 12 to 15 buildings. And, rent them out to people who are looking for, a place to stay.
Yeah.
And, at that time, actually check that the technology is working and, do iterations and make sure, we're fixing all of the problems and, growing.
Yes. And then you mentioned, you worked on the idea of the product, you built it out, you scaled it. It was a good test drive to make sure, like you said, it was working. The technology was working. Your thesis was tested and it made sense and it worked. And then obviously what happened after that? Talk me through what was the next step after you scaled and kind of, saw that it was working.
Yeah, so our idea was to continue scaling, forever, add more units, and in parallel, kind of split the business side of the company to, one is the hospitality side of things, and the other is, the technology sales, enterprise sales type of group.
Exactly.
We actually never got to going through that split because we got acquired in the end of last year.
Nice. Congrats.
Thank you. So that kind of, ruined the plans a little bit. But the idea was, now that we're able to generate profits off of the real estate, that's one business that we can continue scaling. But, to also go back to the original idea, which is like an enterprise, technology that helps, the hotel brands or real estate investors to actually price correctly their assets.
Yes. That's impressive.
Yeah.
That's really impressive, Aviv. And so, yeah, that brings us to the next point. Obviously, exit strategy worked. You guys did a great job of building something to get exit and get rewarded. Like compensated pricely, like you should guys get compensated for what the hard work that you put in. So, which brings me to my next point about talking about experience with financial literacy. Me and you've talked a little bit in DMs and Instagram. You shared some things, and you obviously have a background in reading about personal financial literacy, probably implementing it for your own self. I guess what was your first experience when you like kind of had your aha moment, like, man, this stuff is stuff that I want to know about? So everybody probably has that moment because if you didn't get into school, which a lot of people say, hey, I didn't get this in school, they had a moment where they like dug in themselves. What was that moment for you?
Right. So that actually was 20 years ago. I was 13, so I was very lucky to be born to parents who are super huge on saving money and kind of living below your means. Not to the point of like the FIRE movement, but still saving a lot and making sure that that they're not spending on things we don't need and things like that. So the education started really, really early. But I think that probably around my bar mitzvah, I actually got like my bar mitzvah gifts to myself, which wasn't a lot of money. It was probably like $1,000 or something. But for a 13-year-old kid, it's like a lot of money.
Exactly.
And they were really, really hyped about not letting me spend it, but by showing me like what's a savings account, which I didn't know back then, and what's what's an investment account, and things like that. And it was actually then that I kind of figured out, there's this thing. It's called the stock market. Buy shares of companies, even though you don't work there.
Exactly.
I'm a kid and I'm in middle school. But I can generate, I can generate a cash flow from dividends, and I can generate appreciation, from the stocks going up. And so that kind of got me to a place where I said, okay, I want to start learning. What do these companies do? What's their business? I started reading, financial reports.
Yes.
Anything that I didn't understand, I went to like my parents or somebody that I knew, to ask a question. And if they didn't know, I asked them, do they know somebody who could explain to me? And so just started, going through, because back then, obviously, internet was very, very new, and there weren't forums that we have today, or YouTube or podcasts and everything that we have today. So I think it started off from mostly just me asking a lot of questions, because, this money thing that I've just, got from my bar mitzvah was just like, oh my God, what is this? What can I do with this? And how can I grow it? And I think that's kind of how I started. And I was probably one of those a little bit irritating kids that just asks a lot of questions and then, ask a question on your answer. So I was actually able to learn a lot during that time. It was a great start for that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Mine was a little bit after you. I was probably like 18, 19 when I was like, all right, I played football all my life. I love sports, but I saw another way to be kind of competitive and really use your strategy and your business, which was investing. You had like a stock market game in one of my classes in college, and I was like, oh man, stuff is super interesting. So that's when I started like really digging more. Like you, it's like an endless thirst for the information. I was like doing documentaries, reading books, started watching CNBC. I remember my ex at the time was like, you like this stuff? Because I never cared about CNBC and like that. And she was like, wow, I was watching it all the time. Like, I just became like entrenched with it. So it's really cool that you started like, really, really young, got to build that experience. Because the experience is huge. Experience it could be a huge factor in some of this stuff. So I think that's great that you started learning early. And, you have a lot of experience when it comes to this. So I guess, is there a few tenets that you live by, some, tips or strategies that you're like, hey, this is the things that I stick to, or at least try to abide by when it comes to personal finance?
Yeah, sure. So I'll be honest. I'm not a fan of the FIRE movement. I mean, it's great. It's great for some people, and if you can live by it, like, good for you. Seriously.
Yeah, and for people that don't know, FIRE movement is like financial independence, retire early, which is like a movement for people to essentially a lot of it is like live really frugally, and not, always, be able to enjoy life, but it's to really live really frugally and to just kind of follow some tenets. I forgot what all the tenets are, but I know that's one of the things. But yeah, I cut you off there, but I'd love to hear more about your tenets. I just want to make sure that people understood.
Yeah, no. Thank you for explaining. I didn't know if our listeners know about that or not. But yeah, I mean, even though I'm not that frugal, I very much believe in like living frugally, if that's even a word. But just living below your means. And it doesn't matter, what your means are. Like you have to save money. I'm a huge believer in, in an emergency fund for at least 6 months, not invested in anything, not in real estate, not in the stock market, not in CDs, like high yield interest savings account, where, if I need something, like the next day I have that, moved over to my checking account and I could use it. If I lose my job or if it takes me time to, to find a new job after we graduated school, or, whatever happens, a sickness or something, God forbid, that's definitely something that, both my wife and I are pretty big on. And it's interesting because a lot of folks I had a chance to work with, both in my first startup before business school and also in Dormigo, were like, on one hand, I'm like an entrepreneur. I work in startups, which is like a high risk environment. But on the other hand, I'm super risk averse. So I usually don't get into both in the business aspect and in like investing in finance and personal finance. I never get into something that I don't understand.
Yeah, fair enough. Good point.
Super huge on if you want to get into stocks, read about it. Try to understand what you're talking about. Don't invest in a company just because it sounds cool. I mean, you can, but that's a gamble. So if you want to gamble, go to the casino, and it'll be, well, not now with Corona, but gambling is one thing. If you want to, save money and grow your personal wealth, and ensure that you'll have a good time for the rest of your life, you kind of have to do this very methodologically and kind of understand what you're doing. So I read, financial blogs and, obviously CNBC and Wall Street Journal, etc. Like almost every day. I have my favorite YouTubers that I follow. And I'm just always trying, both in business and in investing, just to learn things. And if you don't know something, write about it in a forum. Ask your favorite influencer who talks about financial, personal finance. Ask Delano. That's going to help you guys understand some, answer some questions. And I think that's kind of where it starts. Like, if you're not literate about something, there's no way in hell you're going to be successful.
Exactly.
And so,
No, that's a good point. You make really got a lot of good points there. It's like, understanding, starting from the base level. And I like the point where you said, if you don't understand it, you can't be invested in it. So like you said, if you don't understand it, whether it's, a lot of people bring up like crypto, which again, you have to that's thinking that we're going to see what it could become of it in the future. But again, if you haven't read the white paper or really understand it fully, I would be pushing a bunch of my chips to the table when it comes to that. I try to see. So that's just an example of really make sure you only invest in stuff that you like understand, or you're working with a professional that's doing the research and investing for you, obviously, like I do for my clients. So that's a very, very 100% good point that you just mentioned. Well, that kind of ties into, the tips for just starting out, which is, I guess researching. But is there any other tips for people that are just like, all right, I'm just getting into this movement of, taking control of my financial life? Is there any other wisdom you can impart on people that are doing those things?
First of all, let me reiterate the previous point of like an emergency fund, especially nowadays with coronavirus and a lot of people losing their jobs or being furloughed, which is super tough, and it's not something any one of us could have foreseen. Make sure it doesn't matter if you save $1, $10, $50, as much as you can. But kind of my first recommendation to any one of like my friends or acquaintances, if they ask me a question, like, let's start with that. Do you have an emergency fund? And if you don't, like, start working on that. Don't invest in anything. Don't get into, all of the Forex and options, crypto, and all of the things that are, either require, super skills, like really deep skills, or are just a gamble. Start with the savings. Like if you can't pay rent, or if you don't have, money to put food on your table, like that's number one for me. After that, I would say, like, once you saved, I don't know, 6 to 12 months of, of an emergency fund, and each person, to each his own, how much, they want to take a risk versus how much they want to save, then start, getting into investments. That could be, like, my personal preference is ETFs, broad ETF funds, and just making sure that, you're diversified, super low fees. If you don't understand which ones to invest in, again, research it yourself or ask a professional to help you with it. And start saving for real estate. I think one of the best assets, at least in the United States, to invest in, probably even over the world, is real estate. Now, sure, some of them are more volatile, some of them are less, some are more expensive, and some are less. But kind of try to understand how can you ensure that you're not going to pay rent for the rest of your life. And the one thing that I really like about real estate is that, especially if you're an investor, and I really like, house hacking. If you're super young, you're not married, you can have roommates. I'm married, so I'm not going to have roommates. But if you can, buy, depending on where you live, but, buy a duplex or a triplex with a mortgage, have other people rent it and pay your mortgage for you.
Exactly.
Obviously, due diligence the heck out of the deal, make sure that you're not losing money. But just that fact of, in real estate, people pay, for your assets, basically. You put the down payment, but others can help you, remove that mortgage through time, obviously. I find that fascinating, and I really, that's definitely one of my passions, and I'm definitely going to get into that at some point.
Yeah, it sounds like you're passionate about it. Real estate, like you said, great way, like you mentioned. If you have a place, rent it out, be able to cash flow your rent or your cash flow mortgage, you can have a little bit more to put in your pocket. That's a great way for building wealth. I love the different strategies. Big thing you mentioned, diversification. You need your stock market nest egg. You need your real estate portfolio. There's other ways you can do it, start a business. There's different ways to create that diverse set of income flow and really give yourself ability to sustain any shocks. But you want to get started first with an emergency fund, then you really start to dip into the other areas, which I love. That's wonderful. What else is going on with you? Where can people find you? You have great stuff. What's up next for you? Where can people find you if they want to tap into what you're doing? Any other cool things that you have planned for you and your wife, or anything in general?
I'm currently, throwing some ideas in the air and trying to figure out what's going to be my next business.
Of course.
Obviously, we haven't talked about this, but you mentioned it. Like, opening a business is definitely something that people can get started off of.
Yes.
If they have that passion to starting a business and also have, the emotional capacity to kind of go through the turmoil.
Exactly.
But definitely thinking of kind of what's going to be next. Hopefully in the next few weeks, I'll be able to announce that.
For sure.
But yeah, if people want to ask questions, feel free to reach out to me over LinkedIn. I'm adding everybody and anybody who sends me a request, and I'm happy to help anybody on the entrepreneurship side or the tech side or just business in general, and things like that. And yeah.
I love that. Thank you, Aviv. This has been a really insightful interview, man. I really appreciate your time. We're going to stay connected, but again, thank you for your time and really appreciate you.
Yeah, of course. Happy to help.